Hey guys, welcome back to the Joe Silverback Show. I'm your host, Joe Bunton, and this is part 2 of travel. Travel, adventure, exploration. So I want to take you back in maybe 100 years. No. This was, sorry, I'm so sorry. 1951. Kon-Tiki. I watched a remake of the movie Kon-Tiki, and it made me aware of a lot of things that I talk about that we can only get today when we look at history. The beauty of looking at history is to see, how we've improved and how we've totally, pretended to improve. One of the things that intrigued me about Kon-Tiki was this. So the story of Kon-Tiki is essentially this scientist was on an island, and it had been known up until that time that the indigenous people had gotten to that island a very specific way until he was there, and intuitively it dawned on him as he was hearing a native speaker talk about in a shamanic way about how the god Tiki brought them there, and it was across the ocean. So he went back to university and academic institutions and then scientific institutions, including National Geographic, and wanted to get a grant to prove his thesis that that unbeknownst at that time, using the raw materials, they put together a wooden raft and 5,000 miles later got to this island. Now, unlike today where there was this reliance on technology and everything has already been discovered and we're just repeating discoveries through watching them in movies and putting virtual adventure out there. This was a time period where man was still connected to his sense of self-discovery and discovery of the world, exploration, the hero's journey. So these 6 Norwegians, I think they were Norwegians, they were Scandinavian men, all risked their lives. One guy was an engineer and they built this raft and they almost got eaten by sharks and storms out in the middle of the sea, all kinds of possibilities, and they were using a sextant to determine if they were going in the right direction. They did make it in the right direction, but that's not the point of the journey. The point of the journey isn't getting to the exact destination. It is the adventure, and it is the risk-taking. So going back to the question about traveling, I'm not a big one for going to stay at the Hilton or the Hyatt or the Sheraton Hotel or any major hotel. It's not my path, and it's not very adventurous. It's not very risky. It's very boring and monotonous, and it's all corporate. It's the same old stuff over and over and over again. So You know, you can go to France today and have McDonald's and have what you have here and speak to only, you know, Americans. But to build a raft and to see where it takes you, that brings me back 35 years to my time of travel, where, you know, we didn't have any money. And I hitchhiked half the places, and then I used a Eurail pass so I could sleep on trains. I slept in train stations. I sang the blues and wrote blues songs and wrote poetry in the rain while, you know, waiting for some French semi-truck driver who was crossing the country to stop and pick me up, and we didn't even speak a word of the same language together, and that was an adventure. And I went alone, and that made my adventure that much more powerful. Now, I'm a twin. I've told you that many times. I was planning on doing a world trip with my twin brother around the world. A lot of you talk about doing something like this with your buddies. I'm a real big believer in having some adventure time alone before you settle down and have family, and like me, you know, you wake up 30 years later and everybody's gone, and so then you get to start, you know, thinking about those kinds of things again, and that's not a complaint, that's just life and reality. So my adventure time alone was and is and always will be the most profound experience, because I'm so interested in who I am and what I am and how I learn about myself, and I learn about that through all of my dumb mistakes and some of my like lucky accidents and some of these risky adventures. You got to have your wits about you. It's like nature, you know. A spider can come out of nowhere, and the next thing you know, you're poisoned and you don't know what to do. You could eat the wrong thing. You could have a snake bite. You could have a mountain lion attack you. You could have a bear attack you. You could have an avalanche. You could be in a situation like I was, where you had nothing to hold on to and there was nowhere but death below you, and you don't know how you're going to get out of it. So adventure and the adventuresome spirit is what has transformed human life, and it's a very primal instinct in a male. It doesn't mean that women cannot have the same magical, wonderful experiences, but we are made differently, and we do have different propensities because of the way we're made. So I accept that I can never experience motherhood, and I accept that a woman can never experience the need that a man has of this wild, primitive adventureness that puts 6 men at risk of their lives, leaving their wives and family to do what they know they must do. Now, if you've listened to my videos, you know that my daughter is quite an adventuresome spirit, and she was since she was quite young, and she was surrounded by boys. And I had to deal with letting go of my fear with her when, you know, when after my son leaped from this highest cliff, she climbed up there, and I shook my head no, and she came swimming over to me, unlike my boys who would never ask or say what she did, and she said, "Don't worry, Papa. If you don't want me to, I won't do it." And of course, that made me all the more humbled. And then I asked her, do you have to do it? And she said yes. And so I said, okay. And so, but that will never change my position on what I'm touching upon in the silverback male as this primal leader who is always forging ahead, while the woman can forge ahead, but is always being compelled and drawn back into the womb, into her wombliness, into her childbearing, into her family life, in a way that a man isn't. A man is drawn into that through the woman who gives him sex. And the more sex she gives him and the better sex she gives him at some point in their journey together, and the more she encourages his adventurous spirit into the unknown, into risk-taking. And again, my wife, my first wife, my children's mother, always was looking at what kind of at-home business she could do to both take care of her brood and fulfill her need to create and be creative. So I don't want, some of you feminazis to blast me into smithereens to say that, I am biased. I do believe in biology, and I do believe in sociobiology, and I do believe in predispositions of the sexes, but that has nothing to do with individuality, and that has nothing to do with culture and self-exploration and knowing thyself and being an adventurous spirit. I am married to a beautiful woman who pushes my buttons all the time, who takes care of me very, very well, and who is an explorer and who has to see other worlds and other places and other countries and speak other languages, and her sense of adventure. I mean, she's not going to take, like I did, my 10-month-old child on my shoulders and go ride waves in the Pacific Ocean with the risk of, this child falling off and drowning. There we're built differently. So tell me your stories, guys. Tell me your own adventures. Tell me your travel experiences. Tell me how you're different than your partners. Tell me your thoughts on this need that I'm talking about in men in terms of taking risk, starting a new venture, being adventurous, the hero's journey, going into nature alone and coming out more wise, going inside and having your journey propel you in ways that your woman can admire you and look up to you and respect you because you have delved into the depths of yourself to come out, knowing who you are, what your purpose is, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. One last thing. If your woman doesn't look up to you and respect you, it's not her fault. Namaste.